Welcome to the first Tuesday episode ever of the Sharp Football Show. Happy to have you guys here. Really excited about this show. As you know, this show on Tuesdays, we're going to be walking through what we saw from week one, in this case, the prior week, what we think we need to take from that, sharing some observations that you might not be hearing elsewhere, getting that information to you soon, discussing how that might be impacting some of the betting markets, and then also previewing the following week. In this case, it's week 2. So we're going to walk through this show. As always, this is a brand new show. We just started our first show 4 days ago on Friday. Here we are Tuesday at noon. Make sure that you are subscribing over on YouTube. If you're catching this on X, thank you for being here. I love my followers on X. If you want to ask some questions for me, we will get to those later on in the show. So those questions will be answered at the end of the show, but the way to answer them or get them answered is to do it on YouTube. So make sure you're going over to YouTube as well. On YouTube, you can follow me at Sharp Football Analysis. That's what you search for. You'll find the link. Make sure you're subscribing, and you can ask your questions in there. So with that said, we're going to get into it, but real quick, one thing off the top. We do have a special running over at Sharp Football Analysis. You can use the code SHOW40 and you'll get 40% off of any subscription for this season. Like the rest of the season, you can use that SHOW40. We absolutely had a great week 1. We went 29-14 on all of our football action this weekend. We hit 8 out of our 10 elevated plays. We hit 10-1 long shots. It was a great and very fun weekend. Highly encourage you, go to use SHOW40 and you can get 40% off. With that said, let's dive right into the first topic. I want to talk to you a little bit about a tweet that I shared and some film review of Kirk Cousins and how that's going to impact this weekend. All right, so let's get into it. Producer Matt, go ahead and roll it. All right. So there we go. We got some Kirk Cousins footage here. We've got the end zone cam of Kirk Cousins. Now, what I want you to know is this. Kirk Cousins ranked number 32 in percentage of dropbacks, which came after holding the ball for 3+ seconds. In other words, he was not holding the football at all. As you can see right here, he ranked number 28 in air yards per attempt and number 26 in average time to throw. On third down, he ranked dead last in time to throw, releasing the ball in 2.36 seconds. Atlanta's early down defense was so bad they averaged 9.9 yards to go on third down. 9.9 yards to go on third down. Sorry, their early down offense was terrible. On those third downs, nearly 30% of his passes were thrown behind the line of scrimmage. The Steelers didn't even need to blitz him. They blitzed him only 11% of the time, which was the third lowest of any quarterback in the NFL this past week. Yet he took pressure on 41% of his dropbacks, which was number 7 highest. Think about that. They're not blitzing him much, but he's taking pressure at the 7th highest rate, despite having the fastest time to throw in the NFL. These are things that should not actually happen whatsoever. Now, specifically, I don't think he's healthy enough to be playing right now, and it's compromising his ability to be effective. This was a game that I was watching with less initial focus live, and then I saw the stats being tweeted out. I heard that Cousins was in pistol or shotgun 96% of his snaps, which you can see here, and you can see that he's just standing here, not moving around very much. I assumed initially, before breaking down the film and actually, digging into the game, that this was just a Zach Robinson taking his McVay influence to the Falcons in a major way. The Rams this past week, we saw them play in prime time. They were in shotgun on 98% of their pass plays. So it wasn't necessarily shocking that Kirk Cousins might be in shotgun a lot. But McVay doesn't use that much gun when he's running the football. In fact, last year, McVay was in shotgun only 33% of the time on running back runs, which was 25th in the NFL. So most of the time, you're seeing Sean McVay go under center when he's running the football. So then obviously we're watching this tape. And I found this view and this angle to be the most telling as it relates to Kirk Cousins, because you should be able to see what I can see here. He is not trying to plant his right leg. He is not driving through that right leg. He does not seem like he trusts it. The team seems like they know it. And because of that, this is why they are designing the offense this way. He's standing there like a statue. And per Next Gen Stats, I saw this in Ben Solak's article, Kirk Cousins moved an average of 3.1 yards per dropback, the lowest mark of his career by over 25%. So once he got that football, he only moved around in that pocket 3.1 yards per dropback, the lowest mark of his career. Now, the Steelers didn't know this was going to be the case, but guess who does? The Philadelphia Eagles. The Philadelphia Eagles know that this is going to be the case. The Steelers go into week one, they're not sure what to expect from Kirk Cousins. That is not going to be the case here. And the problem is obviously when you're predictable on offense, that's a big problem because offense generally has an advantage over defense. The other problem is, think about Kirk Cousins for a second here. When you look at Kirk Cousins' stats from 2022 and 2023 in Minnesota, when he passes without play action, he is averaging only 5.5 yards per attempt on first down with negative EPA and a 43% success rate. But when he's passing the ball on first down with play action, 8.7 yards per attempt, positive 0.13 EPA, and 52% success. They did not get to play action at all in week one because of how he was standing in the pocket. They did not want him dropping back to pass from under center. And keep in mind, on passes thrown 5 yards or less last year. So let's think about how this transitions to the Falcons playing the Eagles this week. Let's turn the page to week 2. Jordan Love, solid, obviously great down the stretch first season starting for the Green Bay Packers. But on passes thrown 5 yards or less last week against the Eagles, Jordan Love, number 31 in completion rate, number 26 in success rate, and number 26 in EPA per attempt. The Packers had no success throwing the ball underneath against the Green Bay. The Packers had no success throwing the ball underneath against the Philadelphia Eagles last week. And now Kirk Cousins is going to be doing that, except for Kirk Cousins, all he's doing is throwing underneath. And as a result, this is why I kind of believe that they ended up sitting Michael Penix after only one preseason game and didn't let him play. We all wanted Michael Penix to play. Sometimes teams are scared to risk injury, and now we think we probably know why. I think that they did not want Michael Penix to be there. I think that they did not want Michael Penix to risk potentially being injured. So that's where we stand with Kirk Cousins and looking forward into week 2 against the Philadelphia Eagles. With the Eagles having this tape on Kirk Cousins, I don't think he can change it. I think he will improve as he gets more confidence in that foot, but I don't think he's going to be able to flip that switch within 1 week. So look out for Vic Fangio's defense here to have some success in week 2. All right, let's go to our next topic. I want to talk about that team that he's going up against, and that is Jalen Hurts and the Philadelphia Eagles. Let's talk about Jalen Hurts versus the Blitz. All right. I want to go back to earlier this offseason, and I think it's in The Athletic. They go through and they ask all the different staff members, some of the front office folks, some of the coaching staff, some of the coordinators to rate all the different quarterbacks. And then they take those ratings and they average them out and they post them. So if you go to this quote, this was in the article, I believe it was from The Athletic, Matt, and we see this quote where one of the coordinators said, the word is out there. If you run zero, which is blitzing against Hurts, or show zero and back out, he will panic. That has to change. They lose Jason Kelce. You can read the rest. So they go back and we look at what happened in week 1, where Jeff Hafley is the defensive coordinator. And they blitzed Jalen Hurts at the number 13 highest rate on nearly 25% of dropbacks over the course of the game. And Jalen Hurts was outstanding against the blitz. He ranked number 2 in success rate, number 2 in yards per attempt at 11.4, and number 4 in EPA per attempt. On third downs in the first half, they blitzed 50% of the time, which was the 4th highest rate, and Jalen Hurts was perfect. Every single pass was successful. So they blitzed less in the second half. So now we're going up against the the Atlanta Falcons. And, Jalen Hurts seems to have had some success against the blitz in week 1. And the Atlanta Falcons don't blitz as much as the Green Bay Packers. At least they didn't in week 1 against Justin Fields. So it's going to be interesting to see their defensive game plan here coming up in week 2 against the Philadelphia Eagles. This is a Monday Night Football game. So next Monday night, we're going to be able to watch the Falcons travel to Philadelphia to take on the Eagles after their road opener that was over in Brazil. Now they get to play at home on Monday Night Football. I think it's going to be a fascinating matchup. I got some more to discuss on this topic once we get to the lines movement section later on in the show. Let's go over to next topic. Is something I tweeted out earlier today about quarterback struggles in week 1. All right, so we saw the fewest passing touchdowns since 2006. Now, games did not stay under the total. I think we saw 9 games go over the total, which is obviously more than half. But if you go to this graphic, Matt, and you can see week 1 passing touchdowns since 2018. I like doing graphics like this. Some people ask, why are you tweeting graphics where you show a bunch of blank space? Because I'm a visual learner as well. And I think a lot of you guys are. And this just really illustrates it. Not just like you can read it, but this also helps to illustrate it. So if you scroll down on this page, Matt, you can see we have to go all the way down. In 2021, we saw 61 passing touchdowns thrown in week 1's games. We have to go all the way down to 35 passing touchdowns in 2024. Obviously, the lowest since 2018. It's the lowest since 2006. In fact, I just didn't include all those years, but it just shows you how far it's dropped. And some of you guys were asking me on social after I posted this on X why this might be the case. So there's a number of reasons, but one of them I want to go ahead and throw up there is that 10 starting quarterbacks this offseason did not play a single snap in the preseason. Aaron Rodgers, Kirk Cousins, Kyler Murray, Matthew Stafford, Lamar Jackson, Deshaun Watson, Jared Goff, Dak Prescott, Jalen Hurts, and Justin Herbert. I tracked them all. Okay. In the first half of the games, now these aren't like bums, right? The bum type quarterbacks had to play in week 1. In the preseason. These guys were getting experience, behind center, taking snaps, whether it was a lot or little. Those guys were playing. All these guys, the coaching staffs, generally speaking, wanted to try to keep them healthy. These are the number 1 starters by far. They wanted to make sure that these guys were healthy. In the first half of games, 7 of the 10 had negative EPA per pass attempt. In the full game, 6 of the 10 passed for less than 180 yards, despite most of them losing their games. So these teams were losing. We'll get to that in a second, but these teams are losing, and they're still not even throwing for 190, let alone 200 yards in their games. All of them are going under their average passing yards. So just note for the future when we're betting on these things from a passing yards prop perspective, which is one of the guys that I took under in a great weekend by us over at Sharp Football Analysis. I took the under on Justin Herbert's passing yards, which, wasn't even close. It was, I want to say he had like 140, 150 passing yards, something like that. His prop was like 235. It was not even close. These guys averaged 6.2 yards per attempt, 62% completions, and minus 0.12 EPA per attempt with a 37% success rate. The most important stat of all of these, 6 of those 10 quarterbacks lost their games, and 4 of them won. That means 6 lost, but 2 of the 4 that won did so because they were playing another quarterback who also didn't play in the preseason. So we have only 2 quarterbacks, Dak Prescott beat Deshaun Watson. Neither of those guys played, and Jared Goff beat Matthew Stafford. So of those 10 quarterbacks, only 2 of them actually won a game against another quarterback who played a little bit in the preseason. And so what this says is I really think that teams need to figure out a way to get their quarterbacks a little bit of reps in the preseason. They need to figure out a way to get these guys' feet wet. And whether or not it's suiting them up, letting them go through pregame warmups and put them out there for a series. Maybe it's a little bit more than that, like we saw with like Patrick Mahomes or Josh Allen at times. We need these guys to get a little bit more work in the preseason, in my opinion. We don't want to risk injury, but games are valuable. These games are valuable. The 2 teams that played in the Super Bowl. So think about it this way. The Kansas City Chiefs and the San Francisco 49ers. Both of these teams played the longest into the winter, right? They played all the way into February. Most of these other teams are sitting at home on their couch, right? Their legs up after their first game at the beginning of January, their first week of January. These guys are playing all the way into February. They're tired. They're exhausted. Their quarterbacks played top 7 snaps, Brock Purdy and Patrick Mahomes. Both produced top 6 marks in EPA per attempt in week 1. We just saw Brock Purdy torch the New York Jets without Christian McCaffrey. We just saw Patrick Mahomes torch the Baltimore Ravens on Thursday night. Of the top 8 quarterbacks in week 1 in efficiency, almost all of them played in the preseason. So something to note for teams moving forward. I really think that these teams got to figure out a better way to start quickly. Games are too valuable. It's important. There's only 17 of them. We have to put our best effort forward to winning in week 1. How are we going to do that? What are we willing to risk? I'm not suggesting playing these guys a lot, but I am suggesting that the stats clearly have shown the last couple of years, especially when you look at those passing yards, passing touchdowns for the quarterbacks. I mean, as teams are resting their quarterbacks, these passing touchdowns are dropping. The production is dropping, especially in the first half of games. So something to reevaluate. Okay, let's get to the next topic. This is a big topic here. Deshaun Watson. This is low-hanging fruit, but I want to share some things that maybe other people aren't talking about quite as much. Just get a little bit of that flavor into the conversation as well. Producer Matt, why don't you play the first clip? This was a tweet of mine. Let's play this first clip. Not pressured, bouncing before he throws the ball, rifling it 10 yards out of bounds. CeeDee Lamb, great catch. Unfortunately, he's on the Cowboys, obviously. Just not even close. All right, so I'm going to talk about some more stuff Deshaun Watson related. Let's throw up the next Twitter clip, Matt, and we're going to talk a little bit about Deshaun Watson and his passing and this offense and Kevin Stefanski and if there's any solution here. So Matt's going to pull this clip up. As we know, there was no preseason work for Deshaun Watson. He didn't do any work in the preseason. I want to talk about Kevin Stefanski a little bit here. Kevin Stefanski changed his entire offense for this guy. Changed his entire offense for Deshaun Watson. In Minnesota, Kevin Stefanski used – the other thing I want you to pay attention to, obviously, Deshaun Watson looks terrible, right? He's not comfortable in the pocket. He's overthrowing guys. His accuracy is poor. He's not feeling the rush. We're going to get a lot of pressures on him in a second. But if you also can glance, just see how many tight ends are out on the field. See what kind of average personnel. We'll talk about that in a second. In Minnesota, Kevin Stefanski used 11 personnel at 37% rate. That was one of the lowest rates in the NFL. And for those of you who are new to the show, 11 personnel, 3 wide receivers, 1 running back, and 1 tight end. So that's what 11 personnel is. Kevin Stefanski likes heavy personnel. Kevin Stefanski likes to utilize tight ends and disguises. He likes to go under center with his quarterback. He likes his run game. He likes play action. He likes misdirection. His first 2 years in Cleveland, because he gets hired from Minnesota to Cleveland. 2020, he's 36% 11 personnel. And 2021, he's 37% 11 personnel. Both are among some of the lowest rates of 11 personnel in the NFL. Both numbers, as you remember, from Minnesota, he was 37%. He's in line every single spot, 36, 37%. Then Deshaun Watson gets here. He's up to 63 and 66% 11 personnel the last 2 years with Deshaun Watson. Now, Stefanski's offense, it does not matter who the quarterback is. It's been decidedly better out of 12 personnel. But the team is shifting because Deshaun Watson feels better and more comfortable out of 11 personnel. Now, I went back and looked at all the statistics from Stefanski in Cleveland. He's gone through a bunch of quarterbacks, Baker Mayfield, a number of different guys, okay? Doesn't matter the quarterback. This is a top 5 to 7 passing offense when they pass out of 12 personnel on early downs. We want to remove third downs because that's when a lot of 11 personnel occurs because your distance to gain is a little bit longer. That's a little bit more of a predictable pass situation. Let's get those out. Let's just focus on early downs. They are a top 5 to 7 passing offense, no matter who the quarterback is. I'm talking top 5 offense in passing with 12. They're a bottom 10 pass offense out of 11. Stefanski's offense works a lot better out of 11, not out of 12. Sorry, out of 12, not out of 11. Week 1. Here's the numbers. Week 1. This is pretty absurd as I'm watching this. Deshaun Watson had 56 dropbacks. 48 of the 56 were from 11 personnel. 48. And then an additional 5 were from 10 personnel. That's 4 wide receivers out on the field. No tight end. 53 out of 56 dropbacks were with 3+ wide receivers out on the field. Are we serious here? So, I know you're going up against the Dallas Cowboys. Deshaun Watson is getting pressured. We've got to improve this. We've absolutely got to improve. There's no going back, though. There's no going back, in my opinion. They're not going to go back to using a lot of 12 personnel here. We're going to be stuck in a lot of 11 personnel. Hopefully it's not 95%. That was absurd. That was absurd. But to me, it's almost like Kevin Stefanski. I don't know the exact situation here, but to me, it feels a little bit like Kevin Stefanski just thumbing his nose at the ownership, who may have been responsible for bringing Deshaun, signing this contract, extending him, basically hamstringing this team and this organization. But they wanted to do it. They rolled the dice. They took the risk. The risk didn't pay off. The dice failed. They crapped out. This is a bad situation for them. But it really impacts Kevin Stefanski. And I don't know if he was the one who said, go after Deshaun Watson no matter what. If it takes a guaranteed contract, let's get him in the door. I highly doubt that that's the case. So I really think that there's a great opportunity here to see Kevin Stefanski have some coaching issues. I'm not saying great because it's good. I'm saying great because it's a high chance, a very likely chance that this could impact his future. And it's the same way that the Giants are dealing with Daniel Jones, who we'll talk about in a minute here. A lot of people can say that Brian Daboll was largely responsible for Daniel Jones. I can assure you that's not the case. GMs have a lot of control in these types of situations. Ownership does as well. And Stefanski stuck. His hands are tied. He's like, Deshaun, you want 11? Let's do 11. 95% 11%, 95% 3+ wide receivers. Let's see what happens. It was gross. It was terrible. So, all right, next topic. A guy who I am really fascinated with at the early part of the season is Baker Mayfield. And one of the reasons why is because there's a lot of discussion that Baker was a product of Dave Canales. Dave Canales came to Tampa, helped revitalize Baker Mayfield's career. Whoops, Dave Canales is going to Carolina. Oh no, poor Baker. He's now without a good coach again. The reality is Liam Cohen, I'm liking this offense better than Dave Canales' offense. And I know Dave Canales is having no success in Carolina, but that's a work in progress. We'll see what ends up happening by the end of the year, but this is not looking good for the Carolina Panthers. But as it relates to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, absolutely fascinated to see the way that this offense continues to develop and evolve. One of the most explosive elements to this offense was a rookie running back, Bucky Irving, who comes in. And this team, they were up big. They were playing a rookie quarterback. It was a little bit, later on in the game, they could go a little bit more predictable. And that's why I'm so fascinated, because next week they go to Detroit. They take on the Detroit Lions. So I'm really interested to see how this offense looks on the road in a hostile environment, away from home, not playing a new defensive coordinator who's working with new players. A lot of that Washington Commanders defensive roster is brand new. That's not going to be the case with the Detroit Lions. They did add some guys in the secondary, but this is a group that's been together for a little while, with a coaching staff that's been together for a little while. How does Baker and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers perform in this game? One thing that we know that Aaron Glenn, the defense coordinator for the Detroit Lions, likes to do a little bit is send pressure. I personally believed he sent too much. Doesn't need to send it quite as much. They're really good when he doesn't send a lot of pressure. But I look at the stats from Baker, and Baker Mayfield was blitzed on 44% of his dropbacks last week under Dan Quinn. Dan Quinn also likes to blitz a lot. I don't think the Lions are going to blitz that much. 44% is a really high figure. And Baker was great against the blitz. He was great against the blitz. He looks like no problem with Mike Evans. That chemistry is excellent. Godwin, excellent. He's getting the ball, spreading it around, reading the defense, using his legs. I think Baker looks really comfortable working with this new offense coordinator, which is he's getting rid of the ball quickly, but he's also still pushing it deep. Fascinating. We're going to talk a little bit about this game in a little bit more detail. Week 2, Lions versus the Bucs momentarily. But I'm excited to see. This is a real big test for Baker Mayfield and this Tampa Bay Buccaneers offense in week 2. I'm excited to see how that goes. With that said, I want to mention we're getting a lot of questions in here. This is excellent. The Harry Snowman, Baker is performing like he's comfortable because he is comfortable. Got some more questions from you guys. Thanks, Tom, saying that you love this show. This show is just a work in progress, right? It's going to get better. We're going to incorporate more things into it. We still got a lot to go. Look at all these sheets of paper that I got here. We got a lot more to work with here for today's show. But Friday's show going to be great. Please subscribe, YouTube, on the podcast as well. I posted the links multiple times. You can ask your questions and they'll show up here. I can read them off if you're following along on YouTube. So hopefully you're streaming on X, but hopefully you also have a second screen where you can ask some questions in the YouTube feed. I do want to mention real quick, ask those questions in YouTube and use the code SHOW40, get 40% off any of the packages up at Sharp Football Analysis this week. Season-long packages, it's a ridiculous cost savings compared to what the off-season price was. And we crushed it last week. So go use that if you're interested. Let's go to the next topic, Matt. Okay. This is Antonio Pierce. Matt, I'll just say, can you post the first tweet that I shared with the picture of Antonio Pierce? I think you might have this one. If you don't have this one, I'll know. Just play the video clip. If you don't have the picture that I just posted, just play the video. All right. While we're waiting for, there we go. There we go. Okay. This is the coach who says he has the recipe to beat Patrick Mahomes. And Antonio Pierce is here. The first shot is 7 minutes left in the fourth quarter. He's got a 4th and 1 at the opposing Chargers 43-yard line, and he's punting the football. And there's another clip. Sorry, if you scroll down a little bit on the page, we get a 4th and 1 also in the fourth quarter where he's attempting a 32-yard field goal. His ball is deep in Chargers territory, and they're down 16-7, and he's attempting the field goal. Now, I can tell you this. If you are Jim Harbaugh on the other side of the field, what are you hoping that these Raiders are doing here? What are you hoping Antonio Pierce is doing? Do you want Antonio Pierce to try to go for it in either of these situations? Absolutely not. Please give me the ball back. A field goal, the best thing that happens for you, for the Raiders, is you get 3 points and now I get the ball. And you're down big anyways. Like you still need another touchdown to win the game, but I now have the football. If you're going for it on these plays, you're pulling the game closer. The win probability dropped on both of these 4th downs for the Raiders when they attempted these kicks, when the punt, one's a field goal. It dropped, meaning it was a negative EV decision by Antonio Pierce. We saw another negative EV decision by the Washington Commanders. Dan Quinn doesn't go for 2. He's down. If he goes for 2, he's down 8. Late in the Commanders game, he decides to kick an extra point, so they're down 9. What's I didn't hear many people talk about what sense did that make. But we're talking about Antonio Pierce here. Let's go to his logic. If you can play the next clip, Matt, of Antonio Pierce in the postgame discussing why they decided to punt the ball there with 7 minutes left in the fourth quarter, trailing 16-10, and obviously needing a touchdown. And you got 4th and 1 on the opponent's 43-yard line.
Yeah, no, we consider going for it as a long one. I mean, got stopped earlier in the game, momentum. Punter had done a good job, pinning those guys back. I think we had 2 or 3 points. I think 3 punts inside the 20. Again, defense was the strength for the most part of the game. Keep them back to over 3 timeouts.
I mean, this is the perfect type of quote, right? Momentum. We're going for the pin, punt and pin. This is just every opposing coach's dream. This is every opposing coach's dream scenario, is to go up against a guy like Antonio Pierce, who's got that type of mindset. Probably not looking at the data, the analytics, trying to understand what's a good decision, what's not. Just all based on feel, all based on, he's a defensive side of the ball, obviously a great linebacker. They did this some last year. They had good flipping the field position and whatnot. But already they're coming out week 1, making these negative EV decisions. He's full-time coach. I don't like the way that's headed, but at any rate, let's go on to the next one. Let's talk a little bit about Daniel Jones. Okay, Daniel Jones. Let's go through Daniel Jones tape here. I'm looking at his appearance against the Houston Texans in the preseason, and what was Brian Daboll trying to do with Daniel Jones? They were trying to go downfield. They were trying to test Daniel Jones, put him in a situation that might not be totally comfortable first game back. And we saw it didn't work out very well at first. He throws that pick 6, a horrible decision, trying to escape some pressure, throws the pick 6. He throws another interception, obviously. But then, if we're being totally transparent, which we're going to be here, good and bad, even though it might hurt the argument a little bit, Daniel Jones settled down in that week 1, the preseason appearance, had a couple nice passes late in the game, pushing the ball down the field, trying to be aggressive, hang in the pocket, buy some time, push the ball down the field. Totally different game strategy than what they were utilizing in the offseason in 2022 when Daniel Jones went to the playoffs, right? That was get the ball quick, short, underneath, don't hang in the pocket, don't hold on to the football for very long. Now we're trying to we paid Daniel Jones. He's our guy. We need to see if we're going to keep him. Let's put him in a real offense now. Let's not hold his hand all the way through. He's got his money. We need to get this guy to play offense in the NFL like Josh Allen was playing to some extent. Let's push the ball down the field. Let's open up this offense. That's what we saw in that preseason game. We did not see that in this game against the Minnesota Vikings. Now, Brian Flores is a great defensive mind, so he's limiting a little bit what Daniel Jones is able to do. But Daniel Jones was minus 17% completion percentage over expectation. And Matt, if you can throw up the Daniel Jones target separation graphic. I want to share some stats on this here. While we're waiting for that to go up there. The Giants were basically trailing this entire game, yet Daniel Jones averaged 5.2 air yards. 5.2 air yards. The graphic is not a graphic, actually. It's just some text. I sent it to you on a Slack if you can find that. It's just a little clip of a picture. Okay. Here's some stats on how bad Daniel Jones was. And if you don't have it, Matt, that's okay. We'll just wing it. Of the last 3 seasons, quarterbacks that lost by 3+ touchdowns with at least 35 attempts. Okay, so you're down big, you're throwing the ball a lot. Daniel Jones' 5.2 air yards per attempt was dead last of all these quarterbacks, right? You are losing massively, and yet you're not trying to push the ball down the field, open up this offense at all, score points. You have to score quickly. Everything was underneath for Daniel Jones at 5.2 air yards per attempt. But here's the most mind-boggling stat of them all. He completed just 22 of 42 pass attempts. That's 52%. Some context for that. Out of 40 quarterbacks to throw at least 40 passes with an average target depth of 5.5 yards or less, which Daniel Jones was at 5.2, his completion rate was the worst of any of these quarterbacks since 2017. Since 2017, the worst of any of these quarterbacks. Absolutely ridiculous how Daniel Jones was A, throwing it underneath though the team is trailing big, and B, not completing these passes whatsoever. And I'm going to tweet something later today that discusses some of Daniel Jones' rankings in terms of average yards of separation, because it gets even worse than this, guys. It gets even worse than these numbers that I'm sharing, which you may be hearing for the first time. I went through the top 7 players quarterbacks in average separation of their targets for their wide receivers. When they're throwing the football, how much average separation is their target getting? Okay. Daniel Jones had the 4th highest average separation at 4.4 yards of separation. Yet his completion rate was only 52%. When I look at every single other quarterback who had top 7 average separation, 5 of the 7 had over 70% completion rate, and 1 had 63%. That was Lamar Jackson. Daniel Jones is down to 52%. So keep in mind, short targets, lots of separation, horrific completion percentage. I don't know what else you can say about Daniel Jones. He's definitely, well, I'm not even going to say what I want to say. Now he's going up against Dan Quinn. Now you could say everything that you want to say about the Washington Commanders defense being bad, about Baker Mayfield cooking these guys in week 1, and all of that's true about the great wide receivers, etc., having a lot of success. I said earlier, Dan Quinn blitzed 44% of the time. Dan Quinn is going to blitz Daniel Jones. What is the answer? What solutions does Daniel Jones have against this blitz? Because Daniel Jones cannot understand pressure. And this total has been bet up massively. We're going to get to those lines in a minute. That's one of my big concerns here with this game going over the total is simply Daniel Jones under the pressure. How well is he going to deal with that pressure? It's not going to be as complex behind the pressure. You know, the secondary is worse. Like Brian Flores is very complicated with how he's sending his pressure and how he's disguising things. Dan Quinn is not nearly as much, but Dan Quinn's going to be blitzing a lot. Daniel Jones better have an answer for that. Okay, next topic. Okay, let's talk about Tampa Bay, Jared Goff, and the cluster injuries. So you're going to hear this term a lot in the sports betting vocabularies, cluster injuries. Basically, we're talking about injuries to multiple players at a certain position group. In this case for Tampa, it's their secondary, but I don't want to get into that just now. Let's first, before we talk about the cluster injuries and the line and how it's moved and whatnot, let's first talk about just Jared Goff and the pressure. So Matt, can you throw up the next graphic? All right. Only one team blitzed more than the Tampa Bay Buccaneers last week. They blitzed at the number 2 highest rate. So Tampa is blitzing a lot. This wasn't any different from last year, though, where they blitzed at the number 3 highest rate, nearly an identical percentage of dropbacks. But in week 1 against the blitz, and I guess we don't have the graphic again. We'll figure that out for next week, guys. Jared Goff against the blitz last week. Number 1 in yards per pass attempt, number 2 in EPA per attempt, number 3 in completion rate, and number 6 in success rate. So now he's going up against the Bucs. They're going to be bringing the blitz against him. He was great against the blitz when the Rams brought it. The Bucs are going to blitz at a fairly high rate. In last year's playoff game, they blitzed Jared Goff on 21 dropbacks of Jared Goff. 21 dropbacks they blitzed Jared Goff. Ben Johnson should know this. He should know what to expect. They blitzed last week. They blitzed him last year in the playoffs. We're going to get Todd Bowles blitzing once again. So do you have your answers ready? Do you have all of your play calls and your checks and your adjustments, how to handle the blitz on certain play calls? But the difference between last year and this year for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, listen to the names for who started in the playoff game, because Tampa played Detroit. We're talking week 2 now. We're talking about the Lions versus the Bucs in week 2. Who started in the week in that playoff game in 2023 for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in their secondary? Cornerback Carlton Davis, cornerback Jamel Dean, cornerback Zion McCollum, safety Antoine Winfield, and safety Ryan Neal. Neal is not on the team. Carlton Davis is not on the team. He's actually with the Lions now. Antoine Winfield will miss multiple weeks with an ankle sprain suffered last week. He's out. Zion McCollum suffered a concussion. He's in the concussion protocol. Cornerback Bryce Hall, who's now starting, suffered a season-ending injury last week, so he's gone. 3 cornerbacks left the game with injury, and they were already without Carlton Davis, and they were starting a new safety because Ryan Neal's not there as well. This is the cluster injuries. This is one of the worst cluster injuries you will see in week 2 of a season for any position group in the NFL. The Houston Texans, last year, their offensive line early in the season, that was a massive cluster injury, right? And it doesn't mean it's doomed necessarily. It doesn't necessarily mean that they're definitely going to lose this game or surrender massive yardage, but it also could mean that. It also could mean that when you have issues this bad in your secondary. And here's who's going to be starting probably. You might have nickel cornerback Christian Eisen, and he's going to now be outside. Tariq Funderburk is an undrafted rookie from D2 Wingate University. He's probably going to be starting. You also have injuries along the defensive line. We'll see. I mean, I don't know. Kalijah Cansey and Logan Hall both missed the game last week for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. They might be back. They might not be back. We'll have to see. This is a mash unit in the secondary, a weaker defensive line taking on a top 5 offense from last year in the Detroit Lions. They obviously had success at home. That's against a rookie quarterback making his first start, a bad offensive line, a bottom 10 group of receivers in the Washington Commanders. Totally different story going on the road in Detroit and dealing with that offense. And then you got Jameson Williams. Jameson Williams with a offense that can run the football, open up things off of play action, going up against this secondary, this mash unit of a secondary. We'll talk about this game in line moves, but there's a reason why this game got absolutely destroyed to the over, the biggest mover that we've seen from a total so far this week. It's being played indoors. And I got to be honest, I was not really in love with what Ben Johnson brought out week 1 against the Rams. But again, you've got a quarterback in Jared Goff who did not play in the preseason, and we know what statistically that happens in those situations, right? You're not going to play quite as good. They needed to work a lot of things out. Jared Goff going up against Sean McVay, a lot of familiarity there. Obviously, Jared Goff, it's in his head. He's got Sean McVay on the other side. Sean McVay might be dialing up all offseason to prepare for week 1, obviously, might be dialing up some things. They frustrate Jared Goff a little bit. I mean, none of that's happening in this game. There's none of that familiarity. Went up against them last year. I think there was like 51 points scored in that game. I think the Bucs offense is better this year, and their defense is much more beat up. And I think that the Lions are going to have some success in this game, putting up points. So we shall see how that goes. Just a reminder, real quick, how are we looking? Yeah, we've got about 2 more segments here. Make sure you're over on YouTube getting your questions in, and we will get to those questions momentarily. YouTube Sharp Football Analysis. We'll go through some questions momentarily once we get through 2 more quick topics as we look ahead to week 2 in the NFL. So last topic here before we get into some line moves, Matt. Let's talk about the Bills on 3rd down. So the interesting thing about the Buffalo Bills in their game against the Arizona Cardinals was, from my perspective, they were decent, offensively. They settled in a little bit, but they averaged 8.6 yards to go on 3rd down. That was 5th worst in the NFL. So 2 things of note there. Number 1, that was against one of the worst defenses in the NFL in the Arizona Cardinals. Number 2, the Buffalo Bills were number 1 in fewest yards to go last year on 3rd down. So last year they averaged 6.3 yards to go on 3rd down. This year, that was all the way up to 8.6. The reason I just want to mention this is I want you to pay attention on Thursday night because the Bills take on the Miami Dolphins down in Miami on Thursday night. So that's the very next game on the docket. Wanted to touch on this game a little bit. Last week, the Jacksonville Jaguars also, as I throw my papers all over the place, last week, the Jacksonville Jaguars also averaged a lot of yards to go on 3rd down against this Miami Dolphins defense. This Miami Dolphins defense is a little bit weaker than it's been in years past. But they still were successful at limiting Trevor Lawrence. I know that there's a fumble from Etienne that should have obviously put points on the board probably and did not. So they should have had more than 17 points. But naturally speaking, they were good at limiting the Jacksonville Jaguars and putting them in 3rd and long situations. That was the Buffalo Bills struggled with just 1 week ago against the Arizona Cardinals of all teams. So just pay attention to the yards to go for the Buffalo Bills on 3rd down this week and see if it improves or if this Miami defense is a little bit more stout. So let's hit early line moves, Matt. All right, so before we get to your questions, we're going to just talk through some of the betting board. Matt, if you could pull up DraftKings just run through the website and talk about some of the line moves here. So a couple of the lines that have moved the most, the Chargers versus the Panthers, that took a lot of money. We saw the Chargers just have a lot of success against the Raiders last week, and the Carolina Panthers obviously looked like an epic disaster. They lost their best defensive player last week in Brown, and this team doesn't look like it's stopping nosebleed, and Bryce Young still does not appear like he's got what it takes to be a starting quarterback in the NFL. If you scroll down a little bit further, we've got the Giants and Commanders. This game took some money to the over as well, and is currently sitting there at 44 points. Once again, this is a Commanders defense that didn't look great, but was it the Bucs offense just being outstanding? I also saw a comment from Dan Quinn that said, we don't want Jaden Daniels running as much as he was running in last week's game. I got to tell you, that was what was keeping the Commanders in the game, Dan. It certainly wasn't all these other wide receivers producing great. And I thought it was a fine opening performance for a rookie quarterback on the road against Todd Bowles. But I am a firm believer that you want a young quarterback or a guy like a Josh Allen or a guy like Kyler Murray. How did the Arizona Cardinals have so much success? Scramble with the football if you got the legs to do so. I mean, when he's like, we don't want him running as much. The guy's picking up like 15 yards of rush almost in certain cases. Like, that's way better than any type of pass. And I've said this before, I'll say it again. The most efficient play call for any team in the NFL on average over a large sample size is a design pass play where the quarterback drops back and sees an open run line and scrambles with the football. That play has more positive EPA per attempt and yards per play than any other play in the NFL. So I don't know exactly how they're going to uncoach him. It's ingrained in him. He did it a ton in LSU. You went and drafted this guy. You think he's not going to take that to his advantage in week one? He had a great game on the ground and was very productive for you. I absolutely think that creates a ton of problems for defenses. So we'll see how the defense for the New York Giants can handle that. And then we'll also see on the flip side how Daniel Jones can handle all the blitzes from Dan Quinn. That's going to be a fascinating matchup there. We saw under money come in the Patriots-Seahawks game. That line dropped a ton. Obviously, on the total, the Patriots looked Jacoby Brissett, all things considered, looked fine against the Cincinnati Bengals. I mean, he got a ton of hate in the preseason. He looked terrible. They thought they might go with Drake May, their rookie quarterback, but ended up going ahead and going with Brissett, and he played well enough to win that game, which also speaks just as much about the Cincinnati Bengals defense as it does the New England Patriots offense. So that shall be interesting as well. Then you've got a battle back and forth on this Bengals Chiefs total. Some money came into the over, some money came into the under. That's going to be an interesting game to watch as we go through. I just was talking about the Cincinnati Bengals as it relates to their defense and what they allowed to Jacoby Brissett. Now you're going up against Patrick Mahomes. We'll see if Marquise Brown is back. Andy Reid off of extra rest. How's that going to play out? Then you've got the game that we were talking about. Tampa Bay Buccaneers, Detroit Lions. So where are we at here on this total right now? I closed my odds screen. Okay, we're up at 51.5. I'm okay talking about this now because it's done and it's in the past and the lines move so much that all our subs are way in advance. But this was a game that we were largely involved in producing this to the over. We bet over 48.5 on Monday morning, drove this line up to 50, a little 50.5, and then it's taken multiple additional waves after we moved it up. And now it's sitting at 51.5, 51 being a key number. So that's substantial. And it gets back to the cluster injuries of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers secondary. It gets to the fact that I think Jared Goff is going to be more improved. It gets to the fact that I think we're going to have more success here from this Lions offense over what we saw in week one. No familiarity there. I think that's going to be a big factor. And then last but not least, if you can zoom back. There you go. Perfect. Go to the Monday night game. Here's another one that moved. a little bit. And this is just wrapping everything back up to the top of the show, guys. Kirk Cousins and the Atlanta Falcons against Philadelphia Eagles, Monday Night Football. This total was 48.5. It's down to 47, juiced under at DK, minus 112 to the under. And the Philadelphia Eagles has taken a little bit of money as well. I just think that the Eagles having a little bit of extra time to prepare of the difficult international game, that defense, like that field, think about the defense of the Philadelphia Eagles. They played on a surface that was horrific. They were having trouble pressuring Jordan Love. They were having trouble getting to Jordan Love. But that field was terrible, right? You saw guys slipping all over the place. And I shared the number. There's my sheets here. I'll find it in a second. These are all disorganized at the moment. Here we go. Jordan Love, when throwing the ball within 5 yards of the line of scrimmage, 53% completions against the Eagles in week 1, which was 31st in the NFL, minus 0.35 EPA per attempt, which was 26th, and 25% success, which was also 26th. Jordan Love was not good underneath against Philadelphia Eagles, who could not get pressure as well because of the field conditions. Now you've got Kirk Cousins, who's not throwing the ball deep. I forgot to get this graphic in here, but I wanted to show, if you guys just go on your own and look at the spray chart for Kirk Cousins, the passing map, where he's throwing, it literally looks like one of two things. For all you guys who are trying to like plant your grass seed now this time of year, you do your aeration, you do your dethatching, you're putting down overseed, and you get out your sprinkler, and the sprinkler is working, and it's a circular pattern, right? And so it's getting, whether you have like in ground or you have your own sprinkler you're setting out there, it gets a certain throw distance, and it just maintains that distance all the way around. That's what Kirk Cousins' passing map looks like. The other comparison is like a compass for you math nerds like myself. Just a compass, it's a certain distance and you spin it around. That's what he was doing. I mean, every single one of his passes basically was inside that compass, and whether it was to the left, to the right, or down the middle of the field, he threw it over the middle a little bit. There's nothing super deep. There was nothing testing the downfield sidelines. It was all like a compass. It's just going to be a lot easier for the Philadelphia Eagles to figure out what he's doing now and what his limitations are. So that definitely could be a problem for them. And I think they're going to have more success getting pressure on Kirk Cousins because of the field. Okay. Let's talk about some of your questions. So let's bring some of these up, Matt. Let's go here. Bills offense. Q Jones says, what's your reaction to the Bills offense without Diggs and Davis? I shared the statistic about their yards to go on third down. I thought they were decent on early downs, but it's really difficult to say. This offense, keep it one factor in mind here. There's a lot of wind. I talked about it on my show on Friday. So you guys need to pay attention. The show airs on Friday at noon and on Tuesday at noon. I talked a lot about it on Friday's show, about the potential for wind in Buffalo during the game. And there was some wind in Buffalo during the game. So that limits what you can do from an offensive perspective there. So I'm excited to see what this offense looks like in better conditions, probably down in Miami. It's a night game. They're not going to be stuck under the sun baking like they normally were. You guys remember that game that came out, what was it, 2 years ago, where Josh Allen and Stephon Diggs couldn't breathe. It was ridiculous for him on the field offensively even. That's not going to be the case here at a night game down in Miami. So all things considered, I'll give you my judgment on Friday about the Bills offense. Let's punt till then. Okay. Antonio Pierce, Marco C says, Antonio Pierce went a complete 180 in this game from all the talk about enforcing their will on opponents. Press conference sounds like he didn't trust the offensive line. Well, I think he also didn't trust his quarterback. His quarterback, Gardner Minshew, did not play very well. Was it 2 interceptions? They also lost a fumble. And this is what he tries desperately to avoid. If there's one thing that you have to do in this offense, if you want to play for Antonio Pierce, is just not turn the ball over. He does not care about like great statistics if you're turning the ball over. He can live with mediocre statistics passing wise if you're not turning the ball over. And Gardner Minshew did not have success with that in week 1. So I don't disagree that they were terrible at enforcing their will. So when you've got a team that isn't enforcing their will with a quarterback who's prone to turnovers, and now you got these minus EV decisions from a coaching perspective, it's not setting up very well for the Raiders. Let's go to let's go to Ryan Watkins, who said, what is the Jaguars' biggest weakness this week versus the Browns? Always one of the biggest issues for the Jacksonville Jaguars is going to be, is Trevor Lawrence pressured or is he not being pressured? Because Trevor Lawrence has massive splits with and without pressure. He's one of the biggest. I've got the graphic. I could show it next time. Most sensitive quarterbacks to pressure in the NFL. His stats drop off at the highest rate of any quarterback when he's being pressured. So I was really impressed by Guyton and the rest of the Dallas Cowboys offensive line at how they were protecting Dak Prescott last game. I mean, Dak could have thrown the ball 50 times if they needed him to and have had a great day. They didn't really need him to, so they ran the ball a little bit more. We got to see a lot of Ezekiel Elliott back in Dallas. So they did not need that, but they were getting protection, and that was a game in Cleveland. That doesn't bode well for this D-line, but this D-line needs to step up, and that's what's going to cause the most problems for Trevor Lawrence, and it's going to be probably their biggest weakness. The other thing that you have to think about the Jacksonville Jaguars, I don't have the stats in front of me off the top of my head, but that run defense was outstanding. I mean, this run defense for the Jaguars was above average last year, but they just went up against the number one rushing attack in the Miami Dolphins from 2023. And Mostert and A-Chain did nothing on the ground, nothing. And that was really impressive for the Jacksonville Jaguars defense, in my opinion. Absolutely thought that was a great defensive performance. Now, does that speak to the Miami Dolphins offensive line? Yes. We'll see on Thursday night when they go up against the Buffalo Bills. But they were having no success on the ground. That's one of the things that I think I will also say this about the Miami Dolphins. You look at that offensive performance, it looked out of sorts, off kilter, just discombobulated. I think that this offense was really impacted by that Tyreek Hill being placed in handcuffs situation involving other players. What do you think is going to happen when he gets back to the locker room, starts telling everybody about what happened, all the players who saw it, who are hearing it, everybody's got their opinions, everybody goes to talk about. There's no focus on like the game plan. There's no focus on the game, and it showed. I mean, this offense was out of sorts, unlike I've seen the Miami Dolphins offense for some time under Mike McDaniel. So now they've got a quick turnaround, but I can guarantee that locker room is going to be, I mean, these guys might be getting police escorts every single player gets a police escort to the stadium after what happened in that last game. And they're going to be a much more focused locker room to start this game. I'm interested to see how the Dolphins do in the first quarter offensively, because it's going to look a lot better than what it did against Jacksonville Jaguars. But that said, there's still no excuse for that offensive line getting, with their lack of personnel, having no success run blocking for these backs. That's got to improve a ton, but that's a strength of the Jacksonville Jaguars. They might be able to make the Cleveland Browns very one-dimensional here. And if they can stop the run, then we get to see Deshaun Watson, who I showed a lot of clips earlier in the show, firing the ball out of bounds, firing the ball all over the place. I want to say on passes like 10 plus yards down the field, he completed like one pass or two pass. I don't know, maybe it's 15 plus yards down the field. He might've been like 0 of 7 or something like that. He's just atrocious. Ricardo Tobar, how long before they make the switch to 12? I believe probably based on the time that this came in, that you're talking about the Cleveland Browns offense, and that's not going to happen. It's not going to. 2 years ago, they went up to 63%, 11 personnel in the games that Deshaun Watson started. Keep in mind, they were 36% Stefanski's first year, 37% in 2021. In 2022, when Deshaun Watson was there, they went up to 63%. Last year, they were at 66%. And week one, they were at 95% 3+ wide receiver sets. I want to say the numbers I shared was 44 out of 56 dropbacks. They were in 11 personnel. An additional 5, they were in 10 personnel, which is 4 wide receivers on the field. And so in total, 52 out of 55, 56, I think if memory serves, they were in 3+ wide receiver sets. They are not going back to 12. They are not going back to 12. Stefanski is absolutely not doing that. Okay, Boomer Larry. This is a great point from Boomer Larry here. Actually, I don't plan to do the show for this long in the future, just so you guys know. I got to run through this a little bit better. I'm learning. This is the first time of ever doing this show. So I hope that if you like it, like and subscribe. I guess that's what the kids say on YouTube, because I'm going to plan to keep doing this every Tuesday, but it's not going to be an hour. We're at like an hour and 3 minutes right now. Get to 1 or 2 more questions here from Boomer Larry. Forcing the tackles to line up on the line is going to dramatically change this game. Change the game dramatically. Yes, it is. This is definitely something, a small point of emphasis that I think they're taking. Look, here's what I don't understand. This is a minor point of emphasis, and they're making it seem like the central focus point was at the first drive of the first game. We see 3 penalties or 2 penalties called on that very drive against the Baltimore Ravens. It's like a minor point of emphasis. It's just like taking over the whole first couple of nights of football. And then you see a major rule change of the hip drop tackle, not even called. I mean, there's been multiple hip drop tackles that happen, and you can dislike the fact that, players should be allowed to hip drop tackle. Players should be allowed to horse collar tackle. Who cares about player safety if that's your opinion? It doesn't matter. If that's your opinion, fine. I'm not going to try to change your opinion. But it's a rule that they put in there, and they are ignoring that rule. And yet they're focusing on this point of emphasis about the tackles lining up, and they're penalizing the offense. But to your point, Larry, if they do call these penalties with regularity, not only is it going to be an impact against the offense when they call the penalty, it's also going to be an impact against the offense every time they line up, because they now know, well, we can't drop back a little bit, so we've got to stay on the line. So how's this going to affect the defensive ends? Pay attention to that Eagles game. Pay attention to that Eagles game as they finally have good footing at home at the Link, getting pressure, or whatever the stadium's called now, getting pressure on the edges. They weren't able to do that with the crappy field. Now against Kirk Cousins, that's going to be interesting. Q Jones had the same type of question. Overall thoughts on penalties that were called, illegal shift, hip drop tackle. I just, some refs are fine. Many refs I've got problems with. The league in general, I think, is kind of funny in these situations. I thought they should have been calling more hip drop tackle. I think this line emphasis is getting a little bit too ridiculous. That's my initial thoughts there. All right, let's get to one more here. Is Kincaid a legit tight end one if Knox is healthy, from Steve? Yeah, but they weren't using him as that. It was windy in Buffalo, as I said. They were having success running the ball. Josh Allen was getting rid of the ball very quickly. A lot of passes to Cook. One thing I don't understand is where's all your passes to number 10? God, I'm blanking on his name right now. Somebody tell me in the chat. Khalil Shakir, like this guy, 3 of 3, great yards after the catch guy. I'm not going to complain too much about the Buffalo Bills offense in general. Like I said, let's wait and see what happens against Miami Dolphins, a true defense and a game that's probably not going to be impacted by as much wind. Let's see what this offense looks like at that point. But I just thought that I would like to focus the targets a little bit more on Kincaid and Shakir. I think those are 2 of your best weapons there in the passing game. Obviously, they love throwing the ball to Cook. So Cook, we bet his rushing and receiving yards over. And I absolutely enjoyed that, cashing that. So speaking of which, 29-14 on our betting recommendations for last week. Hit long shots are props. We went 8-2 on our heaviest weighted props. If you're interested, 40% off anything on the website for the NFL and college football packages. It's not 40% off weekly. It's 40% off the rest of the season long packages. So 40% off season long packages. Go ahead and get involved. with us now. We had a lot of success last year, looking to do the same this year. All right, that's it. We got pages full of notes here. This is what we got through today. Enjoyed it, guys. Thanks for all the questions and the participation. We'll be back on Friday. And on Friday, if you listen to the show on Thursday, we brought on Ryan McChrystal, who's our college football analyst up at our site. He gives out 2 picks plus a prop, went 3-0. We had Pam Maldonado. I forget her exact record, but I know that she hit I think at least 2 props. Dan's gonna tell me that what her record is, but I don't know if he's watching. She did really well. I was dropping props all over the place on that show, and we had a lot of success with stuff that we were sharing. So we will be sharing a lot of bets on Friday on that show. Highly suggest you mark it on the calendar, tune in noon Eastern time every Tuesday and Friday. We'll do Tuesday shows just like this, except A, I'll continue to improve. So thanks for bearing with me. B, we're going to go a lot quicker and faster through these different segments. And then the Friday show is going to be great. I'm already looking forward to it. So enjoy your week. Enjoy your prep. Study hard. We got tons of content coming out all throughout the day over at sharpfootballanalysis.com. Go over there, check it out. We got game previews that are beginning to drop right now, starting with the Thursday night game, Miami hosting the Buffalo Bills. Check that out, and we'll see you on Friday.